Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. What is the Divine Shakti and why is it so important? So it's a perfect place to be together. So Shakti is power. That's what Shakti is that power. Now, with the divine, we've got three different aspects of the divine, three things that the divine does. The divine creates, the divine sustains, and then the divine dissolves. We don't say destroys, because what Shankar Bhagwan does is not destructive in a negative way. It's a disillusion. We spoke about this on Shivaratri. A disillusion. But all of these three aspects, creation, sustenance, disillusion. We say Brahma creates, Vishnu sustains, Shiva dissolves. Well, but with each of them is the Shakti. And without that Shakti, none of it could happen. Neither creation, nor sustenance, nor dissolution. And that's why you'll see in the Hindu tradition with all of the divine beings, all the divine incarnations, or the divine aspects, whether we're looking at Bhagwan Ram, Bhagwan Krishna, we're looking at Shankar Bhagwan, Vishnu Bhagwan, all of them have their divine Shakti with them. And it's a beautiful teaching to remind us that Shakti, that power of the divine feminine, is essential. It's not optional. It's not secondary. It's not a second-class power. It's critical. It's essential. It is the essence. And then, of course, we have so many actual mother goddesses we worship. So divine Shakti is that power. Power of creation, power of sustenance, that which sustains us. Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Mother Ganga. These are powers of sustenance, that which nourishes us, nurtures us. And that divine Shakti, that divine feminine principle, that divine goddess element, is actually in all, not only in women. It's more pronounced, more accessible in women, but it's actually in all. But on this day of International Women's Day, it's the day that we celebrate the presence of that divine Shakti in our women, in our girls. And as I was sharing with all of my beautiful young sisters, young daughters, all of the young women we work with in the schools, in the communities, And of course, all of the organizers and leaders who in many cases are men, many cases are also women. As I was sharing with them, there's two critical elements here today. One is the element for the women. Because International Women's Day is a day of reminding us that which is true 365 days a year. And the first message is for the women themselves, which is to remember that that Mother Goddess is in you. Not just in a speck of you, but actually is you, is flowing through you. So many times women feel like we're not enough, we're not quite right. We're too fat, we're too thin, we're too fair, we're too dark, we're too rich, we're too poor, we're too smart, we're not smart enough. But there's something lacking in us, there's something wrong with us. And if we just could fix that, then we would be okay. Then we would be full, then we would be worthy. But this is a day of remembering that Mother Goddess is in you as you. Doesn't matter how fat or thin or tall or short or rich or poor, dark or fair, extroverted, introverted, doesn't matter. The creation comes in so many forms. We look at flowers in a garden. Every shape, every size, every color. That divine variety. And in the same way, the Mother Goddess embodies so many different forms, all forms. So to remember for the women on this day that we are the embodiments of that Mother Goddess. No one is less, no one is more. No one is better. No one is more worthy. We are that divine Shakti. And then there's the message, of course, for all. For the men, also for the women. Because the first message, of course, is for within our own hearts and our minds and our sadhana and our way of understanding ourselves, our way of living ourselves. But the second message is more of that which we do in the world. And when so many of us think about women's empowerment, women's rights, gender equality, we think about logistic programs where we educate, we train women and girls, and of course, today we were having a big program with all of the girls. We're educating, we're training, we're empowering through all of our programs. And yet, that's not enough. Bringing education, bringing training isn't enough. It's critical. There must be more of it. But as far as women's empowerment, as far as gender equality, it's not enough. Until and unless we've got women sitting at every table, making all of the decisions, along with the men. Tragically, in so many places, it's men at the table. You see the women when they bring in the tea, or the snacks, or the water. On so many stages, it's only men. You see the women when they arrive bringing a shawl or a flower bouquet for one man to offer to another man on the stage. And we won't really have any kind of empowerment, any kind of equality, until the women are at the tables making the decisions. The women are on the stages giving the messages as well. It's one thing to say, well, the women give it in the homes. Yeah, they do. And yeah, they should give it from the stages as well. And so it's a beautiful day of opportunities in the mind and in the heart of every woman and girl to know that the divine is in her. That no matter how less than we may feel, we are full, we are whole, we are divine. And it's a message for our communities, our societies, our companies, our corporations, our governments, that we can talk about women's empowerment and equality all we want. But as long as it's men sitting around a table making decisions, doesn't matter how many training centers we erect, there won't be equality. And until and unless there is that respect and love in our homes for the mothers, for the sisters, for the wives, for the daughters, we won't really have any kind of empowerment. So it's a day of opportunity. It's a day to celebrate, to love women, to love ourselves, to love each other, to bond in sisterhood. And it's a day to realize how much there is to be done in our own internal healing and acceptance and love of the self, and in our communities and in our world. So we take today, this divine Shakti day, as a day to feel that Shakti within us, to know she's inside of us, is us, regardless of what we've experienced, regardless of the trials and tribulations and challenges of our life. She is us. Not only when we perform, not only when we succeed, not only when we've got dinner on the table, not only when we look beautiful, not only when we do all of the things that the culture says as women we need to do, but all the time, every minute, every moment, regardless of what we're doing. She is us. Grace is flowing through us, as that divine Shakti. And then we use that Shakti within us to bring healing and help to our sisters around the world, suffering in so many ways, dying in childbirth because they don't have access to pre- and postnatal care, spending half their lives collecting firewood, collecting water, going into the jungles to go to the toilet, dropping out of school when they start menstruating because they don't have access to supplies, being repressed, being oppressed, being harmed. They are our sisters. They are us. And then we use that Shakti within us to serve them. If we can take that, whether we're women or whether we're men, that Shakti is in all of us, for all of us.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, This is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. What is the hardest thing about a spiritual journey? It's so interesting because spirituality should be the easiest thing in the world. It's coming back to ourself. It's not like going to outer space and you need to learn all kinds of physics and equations and math and science and ways of, living in a spaceship or whatever one would have to learn to go to outer space. It's ourselves. Literally, a spiritual journey is ourself. It should be the simplest, the most self-evident thing in the world. And yet it's such a challenge. Going to school, doing well in school, playing sports, getting a job, doing well in a job, making money, learning to play all sorts of instruments, learning all sorts of hobbies, memorizing so many words to so many songs and whatnot. I mean, we do so much so easily. And yet, ourself is the place where people say, "Are, I don't know, ye to main nahi kar pata. Mere se nahi hota. I can't do it." And so the question then becomes, well, what is there between myself that says I'm going to be on a spiritual journey? I want to go deeper on a spiritual path. I want to awaken. I want to become enlightened. I maybe just want to find peace and truth. What is it between that and myself, my capital S self, that is the destination? What is there that blocks that? I mean, in life, externally, there's so many obstacles. Interest rates go all over the place. Inflation is all over the place. Unemployment is all over the place. The laws of nature, fires and earthquakes and hurricanes and floods, all over the place. But inside ourselves, none of those has any bearing on us. What is that barrier? Why is it such a challenge? And it's actually really simple. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's really simple. It's what we call the ego. But it's important to define what that means, because the ego is just this kind of amorphous word that we throw around like the, headless villain that no one's actually ever seen, no one can really describe, but is killing everyone in their sleep. So what is that ego? Because if you're going to conquer something, and I say conquer very very hesitantly, because I really try to avoid using the idea or words around battle. A lot of people talk about annihilating the ego, beating the ego. Yeah, as you shake your head, no, you've tried, been there, done that. No, doesn't work. And the reason that it doesn't work is because when I say to myself, today is the day I'm going to annihilate my ego, who's listening? Right? We wake up in the morning or we go to sleep at night and we're like, okay, now, ego, gone. And the ego is sitting in there with front row seats to this lecture of yours, planning and plotting how to make sure it's not annihilated. I mean, try to just, don't really do it, but imagine trying to just kill an ant or a mosquito. It's not as easy as it seems. You'd think, my God, a little ant, a little mosquito. But if you've ever run around a room in summer before you sleep and you know that it's just going to get you all night, and there's a mosquito and he's going, and you're going around the room like trying to get the mosquito. The vast majority of times the mosquito wins. Doesn't want to die. Nothing wants to die. Not a little ant, not a mosquito, and certainly not your ego. So instead of thinking about battling with it or conquering it or annihilating it, think about how to live with it. Raise your hand if you've got a family member, and I won't ask which one it is, so don't worry, no family secrets exposed. But raise your hand if you've got a family member who, or a workplace colleague, or a neighbor, who, if it were up to you and you could very gently magic wand that person out of the picture of your life, that you would happily do that. Raise your hand if there's someone in your life like that. I think most people have someone in our lives that if we could just be free of them, but we can't be. It's our family. We don't even want to think that we would like to be free of a certain family member. Neighbor, colleague, you can't be free. They're living next door unless you up and move or quit your job. You're stuck with them. They are the one in the next door cubicle. They are the one in the house next door or across the street. So the question becomes how to live with them. And it's really the same thing with the ego. It's not about annihilation, but it's about how can I live with this experience, and we'll get more into what the ego is in a moment. How can I live with it, but simultaneously, how can I take away its power? How can I make sure that it is not running the show? And that's really the key point. Now, when we talk about the ego as this block, what is that? Well, a lot of us think of the ego as just arrogance. Think, oh, you've got a lot of ego. Like if I walk around and I say, I am so great. I am just the greatest. I am just the smartest. You'd be like, God, she's got a lot of ego. But the ego is more than just arrogance. The ego is actually that whole sense of who we think we are. Everything you tell yourself about yourself actually is an aspect of ego. This is my name, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. These are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. This is my history. This is where I'm from, this is what I've experienced. These are my dreams. This is what makes me angry. This is who I love. All of this is actually part of the ego. The ego is that constantly working aspect of ourself that is constantly trying to define ourself. We're constantly trying to define the self, to identify the self. Who am I? And we define ourselves by the size and shapes of our bodies, by our histories, by our relationships, by our careers. I am a doctor. I am a lawyer. I am a measly window washer. But it's all ego. It's all this false way of understanding the self. But it's a very strong energy that's constantly wanting to hold on to who we think we are. That's why, for example, even just in arguments with each other, it's why being the one to say sorry first is so hard. Otherwise you'd think, oh, what's the big deal? Like, obviously, it's nicer to sleep in a bed together than to have one of you on the couch, and if all it takes is saying I'm sorry, why not? Obviously, it's nicer to be on speaking terms with the people around us than giving each other the silent treatment and slamming doors because we're not speaking to each other. So we speak through our door slams. But why don't we then? The reason we don't is there's that ego that says, if I say I'm sorry, they won't understand what I need. They won't understand who I am. They will take advantage of me. So it's this ego constantly trying to make sure that you understand who you are, that everyone else understands who you are. This is how you better talk to me. This is how you better treat me. This is who I am, for God's sakes. Don't try to change me. This is who I am. That's the ego. And the reason that it's the biggest hurdle on the spiritual path is spirituality is all about realizing I'm nothing. A beautiful capital N nothing. Not nothing as in insignificant and irrelevant, but nothing as in no distinction, no separateness. You could also say, I am everything. Different semantics, same experience. The easiest way to think about this is if you've got a glass jar of air. Okay, you've got a glass jar full of air. Now the glass jar breaks. What do you have? Right? Some say nothing. I used to have a glass jar of air, now I don't even have that. But you could also say, I now have everything because I used to only have this much air. Now the glass has broken. Now it's all mine. And there's no right or wrong. In the Buddhist tradition, they tend to speak about it as nothingness, shunya. In the Hindu tradition, we tend to speak about it as everythingness, purna. But it's the same phenomenon. Neither of them can coexist with a sense of, oh, who am I? Well, I am this 50-year-old female, American-born sannyasi, and I'm about 5'3", and I live in India, and I wear orange robes, and this is what I like, and this is what I don't like, and neither nothingness nor everythingness works with that story. And so as long as I'm attached to that story, as long as I'm attached to here's who I am, here are my struggles, here's what I've experienced that hurt me, that abused me, that betrayed me, that harmed me, and that's why I am depressed, anxious, miserable, addicted, unable to trust, unable to love. As long as we're attached to any of these stories, we can't be nothing, we can't be everything. Because then we've said, well, I'm just like this little thing over here. So that attachment to this little thing over here is the biggest obstacle to spirituality. If you notice when you meditate, a lot of times people will say, I'm meditating and it's beautiful. And I'm melting and merging and just into this beautiful experience of oneness. And then suddenly there's this sort of inner panic. Something draws me back. Sometimes it's because it seems like the breath is stopping. There's this panic that says, what if I stop breathing? But ultimately what it is in all of these cases is the ego terrified that you're going to actually realize how very flimsy it really is. One of the other ways to think about it that I love is, you know, the story of the Wizard of Oz, right? So in the Wizard of Oz, we have the wizard, and everybody is in awe of the wizard, but nobody ever sees the wizard. The wizard speaks to all of the people of the land of Oz from behind a curtain. It adds to the beautiful mystery, it adds to the awe, it adds to the mystique. And of course, we have our yatra, led by Dorothy to see the wizard. Won't go into all the details, but when they finally reach the wizard, what happens? It's been too long since we've read the story. So what happens is Dorothy's little dog, Toto, actually pulls back the curtain. And instead of this massive being, awe-inspiring being, instead of that, the wizard is actually this tiny, puny little guy with a big projector. And he projects his image upon the screen. And the ego is really kind of like that. It works as long as we don't look straight at it, as long as we are letting it run the show from behind the scenes. But the moment that we actually pull back the curtain, so the ego says, I am this. Well, what if you just pulled back the curtain and stared straight at it and said, really? Really you are? I am 50 years old, female, born in America? Really? Who? Who is 50 years old? Well, this body. Well, which part of the body? Okay, say the arm. Well, no, actually see every single aspect of this arm, from my skin cells to my blood, to the muscles, to every aspect of this arm, has regenerated many, many, many times since this body came out of the womb of my mother 50 years ago. So then who's 50 years old? There isn't one cell in my body that is 50 years old. They've all regenerated. Okay. So then it starts to get interesting. Right? So who is 50? Who is female? Who is from America? Well, not the body. Not the soul. The soul, of course, was never born, never dies. We know that the soul has chosen this body. So what is it that's 50 years old? An idea. It's an idea. It's an identity. A birth took place 50 years ago. There has been sort of a continual identification by the cells of my brain, the electrical and chemical patterns in my brain that have continued voluntarily to identify as the no longer existing cells that were born 50 years ago. But you see how flimsy that is, right? And the moment that we can realize that the ego is that flimsy, and that ultimately the goal is to go beyond that, then the ego stops being a hurdle. It's a hurdle only as long as I identify with it. So this is what our spiritual practice is about. This is why we meditate. It's why we self-inquire, who am I? And just be lovingly curious with yourself. When you say to yourself, who am I? And the self says, well, I'm 50. Really? Who? Well, okay, so I'm a doctor. Well, who's a doctor? Who were you before you got out of medical school? You still were saying I and me long before you were in medical school. So who are you? And what you'll find is that even before you have any kind of overwhelming experience of the answer, the simple practice of asking the question transforms you and helps to melt the hold that the ego has on us. And then it stops being a hurdle.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. We are all energy. So each of us is an energetic being. We look solid, right? We can all give our height and our approximate weight, and you get some tape measures. We could give you the measurements of, various circumferences of various parts of our body. But the truth is, if you look at any of us under an electron microscope, there's no circumference. There's no height. There's no place that you actually end and the world begins. We're all whirling energy. And the vast majority of what we are is space. Right? The electrons are whirling around the nucleus of these atoms, but the vast majority of the atom is space. So most of what we are is space surrounded by energy, or space in energy. Meaning that since everything is energy, we are energy. The trees are energy, the sun is energy. The flowers are energy, the magnetic force of gravity is energy. The planetary influences are energy. There is sound energy being emitted from our mouths. Our thoughts even are energy. Beautiful research over the last few years has now given us these machines. My beautiful, beloved friend, Dr. Bruce Lipton, was talking recently about a machine that reads brainwaves without touching the skull. So most of us are familiar with the brain scan where they put all the electrodes on the head. But actually now they can do a brain scan without even touching your head. The machine sits a few inches outside the skull, meaning we are actually emitting enough energy that you can read the waves of my brain from outside. So when we talk about different people or different places or different moments having different vibrations, right? Well, we now know that literally our thoughts are creating energetic vibrations. Now, is that enhancing or disturbing the natural energy of sacred places in earth? Depends what we're doing. I think in sacred places here in the Himalayas, in this sacred land, rishis and sages and saints and yogis and seekers, spending thousands of years coming and meditating and praying, doing yoga, studying scriptures. I imagine it's enhanced it. I imagine that the energy has grown even, at the same time that probably aspects of it have dissipated. I would imagine that the attention, the intention of people who can come these days on a quick half-an-hour flight may not be necessarily as focused, as disciplined, as committed as those who had to come on foot, walking, or on the back of a horse, carrying everything they needed in carriages and whatnot. So I think in a place like this, it's both. I think it depends where you are, but we definitely interact with the energy around us. And if our energy is in alignment with for lack of a better term, the good vibrations, then we'll enhance them. But if we walk into a place like that, full of negativity, full of ignorance, full of greed, full of jealousy, full of objectification, I think we could negatively impact it. And it's one of the beautiful and powerful responsibilities we have, is to realize that we are energetic transmitters and that we have a responsibility, an energetic responsibility, to not only sacred places, but actually to every single person we meet, every place we walk into every day. Go grocery shopping while you're in a really bad mood. Curse everybody you know in your mind and from your lips as you're wandering the aisles. Well, maybe you should work that stuff out at home first. Right? I mean, it's like in COVID, we were taught, especially with Omicron, as it got more and more contagious, if somebody sneezes in an elevator and then leaves the elevator and someone else walks into the elevator, they could actually get COVID. Well, in the same way, we haven't studied it as well, but energetically, if I stand in an elevator and I'm cursing and I'm swearing and I'm furious and then I walk out and you walk in, if you're energetically sensitive, I believe you'd feel it. We pick up on things. And so we've all got actually a responsibility, I think, to emanate as much love and joy and peace as we can. Not falsely. It doesn't mean never be angry. It just means, stay home. Be in the dirt. Hug a tree. Give all of that to nature that actually can absorb it, that can transmute it, rather than to another human being where it just becomes a ripple domino effect of negativity.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. देखो हम बिना expectation जी नहीं सकते. We cannot live without any expectations. We all expect that this hall was constructed properly or कि छत अभी गिरने वाली नहीं है. नहीं तो हम अंदर नहीं बैठे. Right? If we didn't have the expectation that the contractor did a good job and the roof is safe, we would not sit in this hall. If I don't have the expectation that when I wake up in the morning, my home will still be there. My loved ones will still be there. My body will still be there, alive, healthy. I would never go to sleep. Need would never come. We have to have some degree of expectation. If you are married, for example, इतना expectation होना चाहिए कि रात को जब सोने जाएंगे बिस्तर पे कि वो आपको चाकू से नहीं मारेंगे रात के बीच में. Right? We have to expect that our husband or wife is not going to stab us in our bed in the night. No one would be able to go to sleep, ever. So we have to have some basic expectations. The dilemma comes when I have an attachment to those expectations bearing fruit. So for example, I expect that people should treat me lovingly. If I am nice to people, they should be nice back. If I am caring and loving, they should be caring and loving. The expectation itself is not the problem. The problem is when the expectation is not fulfilled. जब मैं बहुत प्यारी हूँ किसी के साथ और वो मेरे साथ प्यार से डील नहीं करते. They're mean to me, they insult me, they betray me. The expectation is not fulfilled, but I also have an attachment that it must be fulfilled. And then I am depressed and miserable. That's the problem with expectation. It's not the expectation itself that's the problem. It's the attachment to it being fulfilled. That I have an expectation, and I also feel 200% entitled कि जो मैं expect करती हूँ वही होना चाहिए. And then जब नहीं होता, then I am depressed and frustrated. So the way around that is, have your expectation, no problem, but recognize that the fulfillment of that expectation is not in your hands. Which means कि कभी-कभी जो आप expect करते हैं वही होगा, लेकिन कभी-कभी जो आप expect करते हैं वो नहीं होगा. And when what I expect does not happen, I need to be able to say, Chalo, I guess it wasn't in God's will. I need to be able to stay grounded and anchored and allow that divine flow to flow without my depression and frustration. Otherwise, every time my expectation is not fulfilled, I am depressed. So that is why we're taught, accept more, expect less. So to the extent that you can, especially from friends, especially from family members, from colleagues, from neighbors, people you have to interact with on a daily basis, try to expect as little as possible from them. Love them. Have high hopes. No problem with that. But don't expect in a way that when they don't act accordingly, you are depressed. Then what you've done is you've put your happiness, your peace, hooked into someone else's drama. And that's when we become miserable.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.